From a student almost being choked to death to a Vietnam War veteran who encourages his students to be violent in their practice, the Karate Kid had a lot of villains. But let's look at some of the most vicious ones. Starting with the worst of them all, Terry Silver. If you ask me, Silver is probably the worst villain in Cobra Kai, and it was the same 40 years ago in Karate Kid. Can you believe that? Back in 1985, Kreese recruited Terry to ruin Daniel and gain an edge at the All-Valley Karate Tournament. So Terry set out to make it his mission to take revenge on Daniel for Kreese. He hired Mike Barnes and forced Daniel to sign an application to the tournament even when he refused. But Terry's plan didn't end there. He orchestrated a staged fight between Mike and Daniel so that Silver could swoop in and rescue LaRusso and gain his trust. Then, after becoming Daniel's sensei again at Cobra Kai, Terry taught him the Quicksilver technique and enjoyed watching him struggle and hurt himself while Daniel tried to perfect it. But that's not all. Let me just say that Terry didn't just want to physically hurt Daniel, he wanted to emotionally scar him too. So he paid a random guy to literally harass Daniel at a nightclub. And when all was said and done, Terry revealed his true intentions in the tournament.
If there's a weakness, we've devoted our lives, and we're at a certain age now, we have to be true to that.
He wanted Daniel to experience as much physical and emotional pain as possible, which is why he told Mike Barnes to score a point and then lose it over and over again until the sudden death round. What made things worse is over 40 years later, Silver is still the same. If anything, he's even worse than before. In Cobra Kai, Kreese was actually the one who brought Silver back and was supposed to be his second in command. That was until he betrayed Kreese and took over Cobra Kai for himself. But that's not to say Kreese was innocent in all this. After Silver, Kreese is probably the worst villain in the movies. Kreese is the closest thing Johnny had to a father figure, and Johnny idolized him. After joining Cobra Kai, he quickly became Kreese's top student. The two developed a bond, and Johnny was willing to do anything to get his approval. But during the finals of the All-Valley tournament, Kreese took it too far and ordered Johnny to sweep the leg against Daniel. Johnny hesitated but reluctantly went ahead with it and lost.
I think they said. Not necessarily in that order. And a year ago, I was arrested for assaulting a minor.
Kreese was enraged and started berating Johnny, calling him a loser, and even started choking him. He would have probably been killed, but he was saved by Mr. Miyagi. After realizing how horrible of a human being Kreese is, Johnny and his friends decided to leave the dojo. Fast forward 30 years later, and Kreese had seemingly vanished, until one day he returned to the valley looking to become partners and co-senseis with Johnny. Initially, Johnny wanted nothing to do with Kreese because of his past actions, but later forgave him when he apologized to him. John Kreese also had it out for Daniel LaRusso and plotted with Terry Silver to make his life a living nightmare. He wanted to see Daniel tormented, even going as far as asking Terry to make his knuckles bleed. At one point, he even tried to beat Daniel up with Silver and Mike, but Miyagi stepped in and stopped him. He agreed to settle things at the tournament and even threatened the entire dojo if they didn't show up last minute.
And we watched, and he called his shot. He called his shot, and he delivered.
Yikes. While Silver and Kreese were villains in both Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, this next character eventually made things right later on. I'm talking about Chozen. That's right, Chozen was actually the villain of Karate Kid Part 2. He was a one-dimensional bad guy whose sole existence was to make LaRusso's life miserable. You see, Chozen is the nephew of Sato Taguchi, who had a bit of history with Mr. Miyagi. They were once childhood friends, but became bitter rivals after an incident that took place in Okinawa. So, when LaRusso accompanies Miyagi back home to Okinawa, Chozen decides he'll take it upon himself to antagonize the student of his uncle's rival. Things really escalated between Daniel and Chozen when LaRusso stepped in to stop him from cheating the people of Tomi Village. No matter what, Chozen just wouldn't back down, and this led to an all-out duel between the two of them. But during this time, a typhoon was brewing, and Chozen refused to help out, even when it meant saving a little girl. This was the last straw, and Sato disowned him for his dishonorable behavior. Desperate to redeem himself, Chozen decided to challenge LaRusso to a fight, but not just any fight. It was a fight to the death. He also took an extra measure by holding LaRusso's girlfriend, Kumiko, hostage in order to make sure he'd show up. In the end, Daniel won the fight but decided to let Chozen live, and we never really found out what happened to him after. But even I have to admit, Chozen had hit an all-time low after the events of The Karate Kid Part 2. He was ready to give up on life, but then his uncle Sato stepped in and gave him a chance to redeem himself.
Supervillain, bad guy, but on the other hand, he's so sophisticated and smart and, an aspirational figure as a man.
Before Chozen, the main villain used to be Johnny Lawrence. When it comes to the greatest characters in the Karate Kid franchise, Johnny would probably be at the very top. It's easy to label him as the villain of the series, but Cobra Kai has given us a much more humanized version of Johnny. Sure, he was a jerk at times and had the wrong people steering him toward bad decisions in his vulnerable teenage years, but there's also plenty of evidence that Daniel LaRusso wasn't exactly an angel himself. Johnny was pushed in the wrong direction by Kreese, and he was peer pressured into a lot of terrible things. Most of the villains on Karate Kids were dumb, high school kids except this villain. Let's talk about Colonel Duggan. When it comes to villains in The Karate Kid, Colonel Duggan takes the cake. He's not only an adult that shouldn't be anywhere near impressionable teens like Julie Pierce and Eric McGowan from the next Karate Kid, he's actually in charge of children at a high school.
Make a show about
He's
this.
actually right, because I'm sitting next to a bonsai tree, which is very Miyagi-Do, and I'm actually feeling that he may be onto something.
This guy was so psychotic that he even tried to have Eric killed after being beaten in a fight. But luckily, he was no match for Mr. Miyagi, who put an end to his actions. While Duggan was a terrible villain, he couldn't even compare with Mike Barnes. Mike Barnes was the one person in Daniel LaRusso's long list of opponents that he actually admitted to being scared of. After all, the Karate Kid 3 villain was no ordinary bully. He would do just about anything Kreese or Silver told him to, and he had the build to back it up. Barnes relentlessly hunted Daniel, showing up everywhere from his home to the beach. He even went as far as hitting Daniel's friend Jessica. Had Mike not been so eager for a fight, he and his Cobra Kai pals might have actually gotten away with their scheming. Thankfully, things didn't turn out that way, and Barnes' aggression was ultimately his downfall. Most of the villains from Karate Kids are usually just bullies, but Ned Randall from the next Karate Kid takes it to a whole new level. He starts off as just your run-of-the-mill creep when he asks Julie Pierce out and she rejects him, but his creepy behavior quickly escalates after that. Not only does he get Julie suspended from school, but he also smashes up Eric's car and beats him to a pulp just because of his relationship with Julie. Ned eventually turns on Colonel Duggan, but let's be honest, it doesn't make up for all the crazy stuff he did earlier. And those were some of the most vicious villains from Karate Kid.